All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going super fundamental with some English grammar basics.
Oh, yeah.
You sent over a bunch of notes covering a pretty wide range of stuff.
Yeah.
Nouns and articles, how to make plurals, verb tenses and forms, basic sentence structure, even telling time.
It's quite a lot to cover.
Yeah, so I guess our mission here is to kind of pull out the key pieces from all this and, without overloading you, help you see how they all fit together to actually communicate.
Yeah. I think one thing that's really cool about English grammar
Yeah.
is that when you start to understand these, really basic rules, it suddenly becomes much easier to see how the language works as a whole,
Right.
So, even if we're just talking about, nouns and articles today, those are two little pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
But understanding how they work together can make a huge difference in your ability to speak and write effectively.
Right. So let's start with nouns and articles. Nouns are basically the who or the what of a sentence.
Yeah.
And articles are those little words that come before them, like an brute or the way. Your notes made a really cool connection between the Arabic say and the English the. They both sort of point to something specific, right? Like you say the book, we already know which book we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. So in Arabic, you've got the say that makes the noun definite.
Yeah.
And then in English, we have the that does the same thing and makes it clear that we're talking about a specific noun, not just any noun.
Right. And then you have a and, which are for non-specific nouns, like when you're just talking about any old book or whatever.
Right.
Now, the choice between a and it always trips people up, but your notes had a great explanation for that. It's not about the letter, but the sound, right?
Yeah, that's a really important point. So it's not about whether the noun starts with a vowel or a consonant.
Yeah.
It's about the sound it makes. So a school starts with a consonant sound, even though the letter S is technically a vowel. And then you have an apple, which starts with a vowel sound. So it's all about that initial sound.
Oh, okay. Now, I remember this from your notes.
Yeah.
This seems like a super important point.
Yeah.
You can't use a or n with uncountable nouns.
Right.
Like you wouldn't say, I drink a water.
Exactly.
You just say, I drink water.
Yeah, that's a common mistake that a lot of learners make, but it's an easy one to fix once you know the rule.
Right, and the same goes for plural nouns, too. Right?
Exactly. You wouldn't say, I bought a toys. You just say, I bought toys.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about making nouns plural. Most of the time, you just add an S, right? Like school becomes schools. But your notes, they mention some tricky ones.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like fly becomes flies and bus becomes buses. And I know there are specific rules for endings like Y and all those S-E, S-E, S-S-Z endings.
Yeah, it can get a bit tricky, but the good news is there are patterns,
Right.
And once you understand those patterns, it's pretty straightforward.
Right. Okay. Now, what about verbs? Those are the actions of the sentence.
Verbs are kind of like the engines of our sentences, right?
Yeah.
They drive the action and tell us what's happening.
Right.
Your notes break verbs down into three forms.
Yeah.
You have the present tense, or V1.
Wow.
Then you have the past tense, or V2. And then you have the past participle, or V3.
Okay, and those are the basis for all the different tenses we use.
Exactly. And we can use these three forms to talk about things that happen in the present, in the past, or even in the future.
Right. So V1 is often used for the present tense and V2 for the simple past.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then your notes talked about the difference between regular and irregular verbs.
Right. So regular verbs, they're pretty straightforward. You just add ed to form the past tense and the past participle.
Yeah, like play becomes played.
Exactly.
Played.
Nice.
But irregular verbs, those are the tricky ones.
Yeah, irregular verbs are a little bit more unpredictable. They don't follow that simple ed rule.
Right.
So you have verbs like eat, eaten, or hurt, which actually stays the same in all three forms. Hurt, hurt, hurt.
Oh, wow. So you just have to memorize those.
Yeah, a lot of it is just memorization. But luckily, there's only so many irregular verbs. Right. And your notes had a good table with a bunch of them.
Yeah, that's helpful. So going back to those regular verbs, your notes pointed out a couple of mistakes that people often make when forming the past tense for verbs that end in yi after a consonant.
Right.
It's not cried, it's cried.
Exactly.
You drop the y and add I'd.
Yeah, that's a good one to remember. And then for verbs that end in a silent E,
Yeah.
you just add a D to form the past tense.
Right, like love becomes loved, not loved.
That's it.
Okay, and then just to be clear, the present tense is usually just the same as V1, right?
Yeah, for the most part, the present tense is the same as the base form of the verb,
Right.
or V1.
Okay. And the imperative form, or like the command form, is also just V1.
That's right. So if you want to tell someone to do something,
Yeah.
you just use the base form of the verb.
Right, like play, drink, sit.
Exactly.
Now, we've been talking about these endings that we add to words, those suffixes like se and esper.
Right.
And each one kind of has its own logic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, when we want to make a countable noun plural, or conjugative verb in the third person singular present tense,
right,
we usually just add s.
Right.
But there are some exceptions.
Oh, yeah.
For words that end in s, she, x, or z, we add us instead.
Yeah, like bus becomes buses.
Exactly. And then for words that end in f, sometimes the f changes to a v and we add e's.
Right, like wife becomes wives.
Yeah, but there are exceptions to this rule too.
Oh, are there?
Yeah, for example, we say photos, not phobes.
Okay, that's good to know. So there are a lot of little rules, but they all have their own logic, right?
Yeah, that's the key. Once you start to see the patterns, it becomes a lot easier to remember the rules.
Right. Okay, now how do we put all this together to form sentences?
Okay, so one of the fundamental things about English sentence structure is that it usually follows a subject-verb-object order. Okay,
so the subject is the person or thing doing the action.
Right.
The verb is the action itself, and the object is the thing receiving the action.
Yeah, so a simple example would be John eats apples.
Okay, John is the subject, eats is the verb, and apples is the object.
Yeah, exactly. And this basic structure, the SVO, it forms the foundation for a lot of English sentences.
Right, but there's that little detail we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Where you add S to the verb when it's the third person singular in the present tense.
Right. So for he, she, it, or any singular noun, we add S to the verb.
So it's John eats, but he eats.
Exactly.
Now, your notes also show how verbs can be used to link the subject to a description or location.
Yeah. So instead of having an object, the verb might be followed by an adjective or an adverb.
Like, he is smart.
That's a good example, yeah. So in that sentence is the verb, and smart is an adjective that describes the subject, he.
Right, or the building is there.
Perfect. In that case, there is an adverb that tells us the location of the building.
Right, right. And then for commands, it's just the verb, maybe with an object, right?
Yeah, you just use the base form of the verb.
Right.
And you can add an object if you need to.
Like have lunch.
Right.
Drink water.
Yeah, and you can also use do at the beginning of a command to add emphasis or to make it negative.
So like, do have lunch.
Exactly, or don't drink that water.
Okay. This brings us to the verb to be.
Yeah, to be.
Which can be a little confusing.
Yeah, it's a really important verb in English. But it can be tricky because it has so many different forms.
Right.
And it's used in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so how do we use to be to form sentences?
Okay, so one common way to use to be is to make what we call nominal sentences.
Okay.
These are sentences where we're basically saying that something is something else.
Right, like Carlos is a hero.
Exactly. So in that sentence, is a form of the verb to be, and it's linking the subject Carlos to the noun hero.
And in the present tense, to be can be is, am, or are.
Yeah, it depends on the subject of the sentence.
Right, so he is, I am, they are. And in the past tense, it's was or were.
Right, so he was, they were.
Okay, yeah. Your notes also mentioned contractions with to be.
Oh, yeah. Contractions are super common in spoken English. So instead of saying he is, we often say he's.
Right.
Same with she is and she's.
Yeah, and it's John is becomes John's.
Right.
You are becomes your, they are becomes their, we are becomes we're, and I am becomes I'm.
That's right.
But you usually don't use contractions when the subject is a noun.
Yeah, so you wouldn't say cats or, you'd say cats are.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up, let's touch on telling time.
Okay, so telling time in English can be a little bit confusing because there are a couple of different ways to do it.
Right. Your notes talked about the British way of telling time, which uses half past, quarter past, and quarter to.
Yeah. So, for example, if it's 3:15, you could say 3:15. Or if it's 5:30, you could say 5:30.
Right, right. But then your notes also said that even in British English, they often use a more direct method, just saying the hour and then the minutes.
Yeah, so you could also just say 3:15 or 5:30.
Right, which is more like the American way of telling time.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think that about covers it. We've gone through nouns, articles, plurals, verbs, sentence structure, and telling time.
Wow, yeah.
And it's all thanks to those amazing notes that you sent over.
Yeah, it's really incredible how much information we were able to cover in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's really a testament to how well organized your notes were.
Oh, thanks.
But I do have one final question for you and for our listeners.
Okay, shoot.
Now that we've seen all these kind of basic rules of English grammar,
yeah,
how do you think understanding these nuances can actually impact your communication in English? Like make you a more effective communicator?
That's a great question. I think when you have a solid understanding of the fundamentals, it gives you a lot more confidence in your ability to express yourself.
Right.
You know, you're not just guessing anymore. You actually know the rules, and you can use them to your advantage.
Yeah, and I think it can help you be more precise with your language. You can say exactly what you mean without any ambiguity.
Right, and it can also help you understand other people better.
Right. Yeah, because you're more aware of the nuances of their language.
Exactly. And it can even make learning new languages easier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of grammatical concepts are actually shared across languages.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks so much for joining me.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a better grasp of the foundations of English grammar.
Yeah, and I hope it's inspired you to maybe explore some of those other grammatical concepts in more detail.
Absolutely.
You know, there's so much to learn.
There is.
And it can be a really rewarding journey.
Yeah. So happy learning, everyone, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
See you later.